At this point, it's been the better part of 15 years since there's been a new Final Destination movie, which means that this one's the longest by a mile of a gap that we've gone without a new Final Destination movie. And now that we have it, you kind of have to think about what it does different. With each movie, by the time we get to this one, it's been 6. And it's very easy for a premise like this to get redundant and for the filmmakers to get lazy and just mix around a few details, make a new set piece, and do something at least different enough to please the fans, but still kind of give them just a generic schlock fest. But now with all these years later, with all these expectations, and since they have so much time to think about it, you would hope that they would land on an idea that they thought was worth telling, especially because we're this far into the franchise, it's been this long. What would be a valid reason to resurrect the series? Me personally, I would have been fine with anything. I really enjoy the first 5. They got me watching the same premise the first 5 times. I don't care about doing it a 6th time. What I like about Final Destination Bloodlines after actually seeing it is that they do a few new compelling things that actually tie together the franchise in an interesting way that they didn't do before. Now, I think they do a few things that kind of break the rules that were previously established, or at least rules that you're kind of led to believe about this series. But now with Bloodlines, what's different about this is that you have this vast conspiracy involving people that survived an accident and death coming long after to reclaim bloodlines that were never meant to be. With that kind of gets into an interesting new way of formulating this movie. This is probably the most atypical way of doing it. You have that beginning sequence, which is just a staple of Final Destination, and although it's pretty epic, it's pretty horrific. I'd say what changes things up is that it's almost left as a looming mystery that you kind of work back around to. There's a lot of unanswered questions in the beginning. You kind of don't understand the full picture. It's not as simple as just someone saw the accident coming, they evaded it, and now them and their friends are getting picked off one by one like many of the other movies. This one works in a way that it's a bit more complicated than that. It requires more answers. And it kind of works within the rules of this franchise while at the same time inventing new ones, explaining things that actually kind of nullify my all rules of death video that I previously made, which is fine and even kind of cool. But with that, you also too get a bit more of a compelling story. The fact that you're dealing with a family this time rather than some friends, it gives you a bit more of an emotional tie to the characters and fear for them a bit more, because if you put yourself in their position, that is a scarier situation. Not only are you dealing with getting picked off one by one, you're dealing with a family, so some of those emotional ties make it a little bit heftier than it would be ordinarily. It gives you just a little bit more investment than you maybe ordinarily would have. And there are some great characters. They aren't the most standout in the world, but they function very well as horror movie characters, and for the most part you kind of dig them. They're just fun to go along this ride with. I'd say this is just a very fun, solid summer horror movie. It definitely gives me those vibes, and it's very much a fun time at the movies if you go with a big crowd. And I think that they struck the right balance of doing enough to kind of change things up, because that is the big thing that they need to think about. How can this franchise evolve, but at the same time not alienate anybody or do anything too crazy? And I think it finds the right way by more shrouding this conspiracy in mystery a little bit as to what is actually going on and why it's happening, especially in the way that it is, and why it would take death this long to come back after these people so long after something happened. That was, I'd say, the big intrigue throughout the first act of the movie. And then along with that, what can I say? The deaths are great in this. I think that this is probably the thing that is the most generic to talk about with these movies. They're generally always pretty great with the exception of maybe Final Destination 4. But in this movie, they come back with a vengeance. You have some of the gnarliest ones. I think that you also have some of the best scenes of tension, especially when you're dealing with things like glass, pointed objects, piercings, things that are in sensitive areas where it's very easy to see why these are very cringe, and they build your tension in a way that you're very much watching, wondering where the glass went, what's going to happen, and you get the pieces of the puzzle, still trying to wait and figure out how they all come together by the end of it. That kind of stuff that I really like to see in a Final Destination movie, and at a very base level of something that if a Final Destination movie is going to be bad, at the very least it's got to do the death sequence as well, style and in a way that's very entertaining, and this definitely pulls them off. But even beyond that, it does have more of a story than some of the other ones. You do have some of this background of what went on with this family, and it does tie into the overall story with Death's plan. Sometimes in these horror movies, when you add some family drama to the mix, it can feel like arbitrary. Sometimes it leads nowhere, or it's just to fill out extra padding in the time in between people getting killed, and it doesn't matter. It is relevant, I will say, at the very least, which, I mean, movies should do that anyway. You shouldn't just give a movie a pass because you don't expect much of it. It's not that I don't expect much from the Final Destination franchise. It's just that when I go into a movie like this, I have pretty simple needs of what I need to get out of a movie like this. And the fact that a movie like this is willing to give you a little more leaves me walking away happier than I would be if it was just another generic sequel where people die. And although I'd walk away being like, yeah, that was fun, it's a lot less memorable when it's just a copy-paste situation. I know a lot of people are big fans of Final Destination 3, and although I find it very watchable, very easy to rewatch, and if I wasn't being critical of it, I don't think that I'd think anything of it. But when you evaluate it critically, it is just another movie in the DVD pack. There's nothing to me that separates it way too much from the first two movies, and I don't think that there's really anything that it does better than the first two movies. So although it delivers on those kills, it delivers on those things that I come to this franchise enjoying, in that movie specifically, all I can really compliment it on is the things that aren't unique to that individual piece of the franchise. More that it's just I enjoyed it for the things that I come to a Final Destination movie looking for. Bloodlines actually has some strong aspects outside of the strong suits of this franchise, and it brings me back to that first movie where in the first movie a lot of that is unveiling the conspiracy, unveiling what's really going on with Death, what Death wants with these people and what's going to happen, the order, things like that. So it can get along on that intrigue, and I think that what Bloodlines was trying to do is bring that intrigue back into it. A lot of the sequels is just the characters getting caught up to speed on things that we already know so that we could just get to this new story of this new cast of characters. But in this one, they actually add a new element of why does this event so far in the past impact all these people so far in the future? Why is it taking so long? Questions like that it raises, and I think pays off in an interesting way that is compelling. It has some twists, ways of subverting your expectations with the order of the characters, and because of that, it's able to just leave you continuously guessing when it obviously could have taken very much the low road. And this movie made over $100 million opening weekend, which is insane. So you know we're going to get more Final Destination movies going forward. I really don't know why it's taken almost 15 years to make a new one, but it seems like this will reinvigorate the franchise and definitely bring it back with a vengeance. And for good reason too. I will say that this is definitely one of the strongest entries, and I was very pleasantly surprised when the first poster came out, and even the first teaser, I was a little bit worried that it would just be a bit cheaper of an entry. I thought the first poster was kind of terrible, to be honest, but obviously word of mouth is very strong. I think it's very well deserved. This is a great Final Destination movie, and I hope that they continue making more Final Destination movies like this. With the effort being put into it, definitely paid off, and for all this wait that we had since the last movie, it's good that they came back with such a strong entry. If they didn't, that probably would have been it for Final Destination. If it flopped, you know, that would have been a failed experiment. But I think that with this, it's showing that Final Destination is very much still a viable horror franchise and that there's still interest in it. And I'm glad to see that because, well, I'm a big fan of the first five, and this was a very strong entry. So if they choose to do more, I'm excited to see what they do next. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section. I'd love to hear. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.